Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world. This is part 2 of this episode. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already. Link in the description.
Okay, we're back to part 2. If you haven't watched part 1, I suggest you go and have a look. It came out a couple of days ago. I'm here with Nick. We were just talking about Nick's new venture, the canned water venture. What was he say it was called again? Pinché Agua. So we've probably just offended some Spanish people there because apparently that's a swear word, but it's okay. Yeah, so the couple of questions I wanted to ask about that I had remaining from part 1 that I didn't get a chance to ask. Are you going to be sort of launching this, or are you launching this like D2C, or is the goal to sort of go to businesses and kind of get people to stock it in hotels, etc.? Like what's the sort of commercial strategy there?
Yeah, ultimately we want to be in convenience stores, OXXO, 7-Eleven, Circle K, but it'll take a while for us to get there, probably a year or two. We're starting off in private events here in Mexico City, specifically punk heavy metal events, because we're an edgy company and we need to kind of capitalize on that narrative, right? So we're a canned water company that started in Mexico City's punk and heavy metal scene. That's
pretty niche.
Right? And it lets everybody know kind of like at first glance what kind of water company they're expecting. So yeah, private events. A lot of the festivals we've learned are under exclusivity contracts with large water vendors and beverage companies, but their VIP lounges are not. So we're going to be stocking some VIP lounges for some of the festivals for like the green room and backstage crew. And then I'm approaching a couple of celebrities this year to try to get them on board as an investor and sponsor. I think that's going to be a big deal for us in the early
Mexican celebrities.
Yes, Mexican celebrities, either stage screen celebrities or athletes. And then we're going to do a small fundraising round in the middle of the year if all the traction metrics look good. But a beverage company takes a lot to advertise, right? If there's like a lot of, right, a vodka company needs to separate themselves from the 10 other vodkas out there. But luckily, there's only going to be us in the canned water space here in Mexico. Liquid Death is here, but no one really knows about it. Doesn't have the brand equity it does in the United States. So there's very little competition. So we'll be able to stand out. We're relying on this counterculture narrative, this loud, brash brand, and the fact that there's a lot of public dissatisfaction and disquiet around the extractive nature and the mistrust of these large multinational corporations. So the fact that Pinché Agua is a Mexican brand, it is a Mexican company, the water is coming from Mexico. Well, we might need to change that. It feels like it has more genuine intentions than some of the other companies that are doing business here. So we're riding on those instead of a marketing budget early on. To get off the ground. But we've got a lot of testing to do, right? Like we just have the V1 of our label, the V1 of our name and brand. There's going to be a V2 and a V3. We just don't know how they're going to evolve yet. And a lot of the things that will shape that evolution are going to come from our early market testing. And for those of us who weren't in part 1, my background and experience is in software testing, is testing products on screens, digital products, et cetera. And so what I'm doing now is abstracting and translating the lessons of testing a product in the digital landscape to the physical one through this canned water thing. So what I'm going to be doing in the next couple of weeks or in January is going out to some parks here in Mexico City, putting out our can side by side with 10 other water brands and asking for feedback on each of the brands, not just ours, because that would probably expose us. We're going to be asking about Bonafont and all the other water companies that are out there, and getting feedback on the price point, the brand, the narrative, what goes into deciding which water to choose. Do you care? Is water insecurity top of mind? So a lot of great questions that I'll be writing down on the clipboard in the background as my colleagues are kind of like asking the answer and asking these questions of real people.
Are you going to have a control as well of just a glass of water, just to keep it completely fair?
That's interesting. I had thought the control was a plastic bottle.
Okay.
But that's an interesting, I like that because maybe it's like Yeah, it's a big, maybe there's a large format water, like they call them Gataphones here, but like 20 or bigger liters that we can use to fill a glass. That's an interesting idea, Greg. I like that.
There you go. You're welcome. I'll send you an invoice later. We
Thank you.
we we had on the show actually. When was it? On the 2nd and 4th of December, a really interesting guy by the name of Clement, who is a VC for I'm forgetting the name now, DLF Venture, which are a consumer brand VC firm. So they specifically invest into companies like yours. Really interesting guy, and he was telling me about so many things around this space that I wasn't too familiar with, because my thing's kind of mostly been tech and SaaS, similar to like your previous career, I guess. And so, really I wasn't too aware of all the different approaches that you can launch these kind of brands, and, the different resources out there. Like he was telling me about how so many big supermarkets now are investing a huge amount of money into this space to help sort of incubate the next generation of new products and ideas. And there's so much happening there, and it seems like so monumentally difficult to come up with these kinds of products, whether they're food products or drink products or whatever they might be. But actually he made it out that it's never been easier, and that was kind of exciting to me to know that someone at home in their kitchen could make a recipe and refine it and bring it out to the world, in whatever way, in whatever capacity it is, whether it's pet food, human food, drinks, etc. That's really exciting. I'd highly recommend you check this guy out, at some point.
Absolutely.
It was a really interesting conversation.
Great. Yeah, I will, and I'll listen to the episode.
Yeah, but so that's really cool, and I like the fact that you're kind of trying to align yourself with such a unique sort of subculture or counterculture in Mexico. That's really cool, and that resonates with me because actually in another career in my sort of teens and early 20s, I used to be heavily involved in the live music scene, and that was kind of a big thing for me, and it included like metal and all kinds of stuff back in the day.
Nice.
Have you thought about sort of just tapping into the more local scene in that regard too? So like local music venues and gig nights, we're going to be
like there's counterculture lives in a bunch of different places that we didn't realize, like barber shops. Here in Mexico City, they always give you like a bottle of water, like a beer or something for some mezcal or whatever. And, these guys, the barbers and women as well, they're always sleeved up. I see you got some tattoos. I got some tattoos. Yeah. They're leading the narrative around like what's cool. And so
tattoo studios, piercing places, like there's a whole ton, biker shops, like
all these. So what is currently occupied by like a small plastic bottle that has no buy-in or alignment with that industry, it's just serving its purpose for hydration, is a very open market for us. Like it's very available. People are very interested in having a cooler can thing on their shelf that aligns with their counterculture vibe in the barbershop or in the tattoo studio. So we're starting in places like that, like the VIP lounges, like I was saying. We're thinking about bringing a sparkling water, or like a carbonated version, into the market for bars to use with cocktails. So there's a bunch of different ways that we're exploring starting. But what I've realized in starting, what's important is that we create a story that's appealing and interesting as the company grows. So starting in Mexico City is cool on its own. Starting in the heavy metal and punk scenes within Mexico City is like a little hardcore, and it gives that idea. And then the fact that we have this altruistic business model where we're giving 30% of our profits to these projects makes it feel like we've got a good balance of cool and edgy and purpose driven, which I think is going to be really appealing to folks, even more than it was in the United States for Liquid Death. Because Liquid Death doesn't really advertise themselves as anything but water. They're not more recyclable or more sustainable. They're not a higher quality water or there's nothing. It's just fun. And
which is a good thing, because I think people would see through that anyway. They'd just be like, dude, you're putting water in a can, like shut up.
And so we're starting some ad campaign creative on that. It's like we're naming what is weird and strange about this. Like
address the elephant in the room, or the can in the room.
Exactly. So are you really even giving money back to these water projects? Like, does that water, do those dollars even really do anything? Don't tell me it's more recyclable because cans are lined with plastic. So you're not reducing the issues with microplastic or recyclability, aluminum, there's so many ways to poke holes in everything. And I've thought of a lot of them.
Mm.
I'm sure we'll hear more as we release and go public, but naming them and saying that, being really pure about our mission, it's like, we want to take the dollars that you're currently not giving to water security projects, give them to water security projects, and create a platform for that to kind of continue without you having to think about it. You're not going to go and donate to this water project in Mexico City. You're just going to keep buying the water at the festival you're going to or whatever it is. So we're taking an existing pattern and just rechanneling where the dollars are going.
What, in terms of a market, I mean, I know very little about Mexico and especially about Mexico City, but how sort of socially conscious is that particular group? Your target market, are they equally as conscious?
It's a funny way to phrase it, right? Like, social consciousness is a privilege for certain people, right?
Yeah,
in a society, like, to be conscious of the problem that's happening in society. It's like a large portion of Mexico City is not conscious of this. They're suffering from the problem, right? Like, they had their water turned off for 3 days. So you can't wash anything. You can't, do a lot unless you have that storage mechanism in place. So, like, there's communities mostly on the outskirts of the city, actually, but now even more so coming into the center, that deal with this on a regular basis. So it's not like in the United States where it's like, we hear about it on the news.
They're theoretical issues.
Right, exactly. It sounds like a cause that we should get back to. That's kind of why I'm
asking, because if it feels like, it may not be the same kind of
that's right.
The same kind of messaging may not resonate the same way as it would do for a more traditionally Western group of people because of the way that you frame it, the way that you put it across. It can appeal to people's altruistic nature, or maybe even slightly their egos, and the sort of charity plays. They can work in a number of different fronts, right? Make people feel better, essentially. Whereas this is maybe more feeling like, I don't know, less activism and more sort of action, like, this thing directly affects me or the people I know. So maybe you see what I mean? I'm sure you've thought about this, and I'm just preaching to the choir.
And we're still learning about it, right? That's a lot of, I think, part of the testing.
And I suppose, to your point, there may be some distrust as a result, because it's like you're claiming to help me with this thing, the thing that I know is a problem for me and the people that I know in my community. So what, prove it. Like, where's the proof?
Prove it. So we're about to redesign the site to have a couple of new elements, but one is this like corporate transparency page that goes through where we're sourcing the water, how much money we've spent so far, how much money we've made so far, what our plans are and forecasts are for the year. And that's just going to be a page that I edit and design myself and I maintain, and we'll have the receipts. Someone will be like, why'd you spend $300 more on the cans? And I'll be like, that's because we bought the wrong lids. And I can write that, I'll be able to, why did you, do this, or why'd you do that? And I'll have notes on this page where people can explore. I think that'll really make a big impact on the believability. Early on, we're not going to be making really any profit because everything's going to be reinvested into the company and its growth, but we will need to be making some impact. So I'm going to be doing like a little fundraising, some personal monies, friends and family, to make sure that of the, let's say we sell $10,000 worth of cans, we need to put $3,000, 30% of that into a project. So I need to make sure that I'm actually doing that early on, and that this isn't something that'll eventually happen, because that also will affect our credibility. Internally, the employees of the company are signing a pledge for water conservation in our own personal lives. Like, we're not going to let the shower run for this amount of time, or we're going to use high efficiency products, in our homes and businesses. We want to try to like really build a company culture that shows that this is a priority and is the priority for the company, not just a marketing tactic, not just, a way to differentiate ourselves.
So, I mean, are you implying, and I don't want to sort of, put words into your mouth, but are you implying that there's a lot of companies out there that do it for those other reasons, do you think?
Absolutely. Greenwashing is now commonplace.
So look, I'm going to throw something at you, and you can tell me if you think this is full of shit or not. But I often think that, what we consider to be conspiracy, corruption, and things like that is usually can be boiled down to just incompetence. that more often than not, there's not any massively well orchestrated attempt to try and mislead people, to try and, pull the wool over people's eyes. But it's just that it's a series of incompetent people being incompetent at what they do, and not in an inefficient system that isn't very good at, cross communication and the sharing of ideas and
I can agree with that.
you see what I mean, right? So
Yeah.
So when we say that about greenwashing, I think greenwashing is another example of that, in my opinion, where you, not always, but you quite often will get companies that have individuals in them, usually, at the top level, that have these great visions of the ways that they can, positive aspirations, exactly, of how they can contribute positively to society, this, that, and the other. And then the reality hits that it's far more complicated than they realize, that actually to run a profitable, highly complex corporate machine, there are some inevitabilities in that mean you can't quite do it the way that you wanted to, but you've made promises to shareholders, right? Or you've made promises to customers. So I don't know, is that being too generous?
No, I think that's realistic. Unfortunately, my delusion and optimism is driving me into this wall. And I'll keep you posted on how realistic this is. We certainly have the intentions, and I've certainly got the resources, right? Like I've got raised more than $50 million in my career. I know how to go out and get money and apply it to a problem. I know how to demonstrate traction.
I might need your help next year.
Absolutely.
Give me some.
I know how to tell a story, and I know how to put a story together ahead of time so that I can be empowered by that story, right? So we'll see how this goes. And I think actually Mexico is primed for this type of a business model, because there's not too many, right? Like Tom's Shoes took the world by storm and changed the way business is done. And now they have an optical arm. They're not just doing shoes, and give one, get one. Conscious capitalism is all over the place, but it's not really that much here. Like, I still have a lot to learn, but I haven't been seeing large, successful corporations with a public service slant. There's a lot of public service nonprofits and NGOs. There's a lot of university collaboration. There's government programs that are largely underfunded to deal with this. Actually, the new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, she was the former mayor of Mexico City and has an education in environmental science, and I think won a Nobel Prize, collaborative Nobel Prize, for something related to environmental science. And she just released a press release like last month or a couple of weeks ago about how the government is really taking the water insecurity seriously, and there's a ton of initiatives, public-private partnerships that are going on. And so I'm hoping to also ride that wave, right? Like, I think that this company is coming into fruition at the perfect time between, the climate crisis, population growth, the new administration, them having things to prove and making a mark on the country. My perspective as an American capitalist and branding expert, there's a lot of things that I think are converging that could make this a really big success. Or it could make it a really big failure. Either way, I'm going to be learning a lot, and I can't wait to share those lessons with other entrepreneurs here with a similar vision and aspiration.
That's a great attitude to have as well, to just be like, look, either way, I'll be happy. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's a really good attitude to have, and I think that it's an attitude that you absolutely need to have as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
This
kind of one of my first forays into consumer packaged goods. So I'm now learning how to do that better. Which is a skill I know will pay dividends in the future.
No, I think it's an important approach to have, because if again it kind of goes to this idea of there being this duality, this contradiction. You need to believe with absolute conviction in your business, in your vision, etc. But if you are so married to it that failing destroys you, or someone criticizing it destroys you, then you're probably too close to it. So it's a really interesting thing. You need to hold on to it like it's your own baby and not let go, but also need to be prepared to let go when the time is right, which I guess is why maybe the analogy of being a parent and a startup being a lot like a child is such a good analogy, because it is about letting go of it when the time is right.
Yeah.
Whether that is because it turns around and says, I hate you, Dad, or this isn't working and I want to move out, or because they've successfully grown up to be functioning adult and they want to have their own family or whatever.
Amen.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
So I
And
guess
the other
it's a
parenting
fine line.
advice that comes to mind is it takes a village.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think, right, you can't just do it on your own. You gotta include some other people in this, and the baby benefits from that, right? So
yeah. And equally, there are a lot
of
of bad actors out there that are looking to
corrupt
to corrupt your kid too. So it's the analogy works on many, many levels. I actually did an episode with a startup. It was a bonus episode a couple of weeks ago with a startup psychologist, and we looked back at previous episodes, clips, and so on. And the analogy that ran throughout the whole episode was the parent and child analogy.
Wow.
It kept coming up because it's such a strong analogy.
I gotta listen to that one. That sounds so fascinating.
It was really cool. It was only a 1 hour special, but it was really interesting. Yeah, he had chosen clips from previous episodes of things that other founders and investors have said on this show, and we just kind of dived into it. It was really interesting. He had a lot of really interesting insights on the sort of founder mindset and so on. But yeah, by the way, I haven't asked, why are you in Mexico? Because where are you from in the States originally?
I was born in New York.
Right.
I lived in Chicago for 10 years or 8 years, and then we moved here. I think if I had to say it was one reason, it was just because it feels good here. It's a very inspiring place. There's a lot of lush greenery, different types of architecture. Chicago is a city built by real estate developers who really square gray boxes and have planned the city in a way that is not about community, is not about interconnection, not human in so many ways. And I just started to feel really uninspired, and I thought it was me. I thought it was the career trajectory I was on, but really it was the environment I was in. Because as soon as I moved here, I felt more inspired. I felt more connected. The ancient history that exists here in Mexico was not completely wiped away like it was in the United States. I guess one of the differences between the UK and different parts of Europe is that there were cultures there for hundreds of years before they became the empires that they were. America erased history and more than one group of people, and that was to the detriment of the culture today. The way that we see our cities, the way that we interact in society. And when I started here in Mexico, I realized that there's heritage that goes back thousands of years that's still persistent today, whether it's the way that they're, making their spirit of mezcal and tequila, or if it is the way that they're preparing food and the way that they're harvesting. Even in government, regulation, there's been this huge issue between trade issue between the United States and Mexico about GMO. They will not import GMO products to the United States, even though they're asking, because they don't want GMO shit in their country. And I could totally appreciate and respect that. So those attitudes have kind of stayed persistent. And I find that really refreshing and invigorating, and something that I felt really like I missed as an American, also because I'm of immigrant heritage, right? I'm Irish, Italian, German, French, whatever, European. And I don't really have that much connection to my ancestors and to the culture. Okay, I know how to fucking make a decent pasta, calling myself an Italian. And by living here in Mexico, there's a cultural underpinning that I can tap into and that is accessible to me and makes me feel a part of a tapestry of culture that goes back far beyond my parents and myself. And now I have a son here and he's Mexican, so I feel even more invested in the country now. And I think that definitely had contributed to the reason why I wanted to start Pinché Agua.
How old's your son?
Just turning 6 this weekend. 6
really?
months.
Oh, wow.
Sorry. 6 months old, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, so still very fresh.
Yes, I'm in the thick of it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, I think I remember when we first spoke. Yeah. You were telling me about that as well. How are you finding being a dad?
It's a trial every day.
Nothing can humble you more.
Yes. I'm feeling the shortcomings. I'm feeling the victories. But yeah, I think I'm unlearning a lot from my father and his father, my brother. I think that there's just things that I didn't realize. Mainly I have aggression in my family that can come out in unhealthy ways. So I'm unlearning a lot of that and trying to find different coping mechanisms.
I can tell you with certainty that as a father of 2 sons and speaking to a father of a son, that aggression will come in handy.
Yeah,
it will, because it's required. It is
It
required.
is
There
there
is,
are healthy ways. Yeah, I agree. I
yeah,
agree. And there are also unhealthy ways. So
absolutely.
I'm just finding that
Yeah.
line.
And you don't always get it right. You don't always get it
No.
right. And look, 6 months old, there's not really any need for it. It's when they get older that they start to test boundaries. And, I've got
Yeah.
a 10-year-old and a 2-year-old. The 10-year-old,
You draw the line.
I
Yeah.
need to put my foot down every now and then. And it's not enough to just say, please, sir, would you mind, sir? It has to be, don't fucking do that
Go
again,
do
or
this.
I'm
Yeah.
throwing you
Yeah.
out the fucking window.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that I would, but there needs to be some element of threat
And consequence. I do.
and consequence.
I can believe that. I can believe that. I think there's a lot of this like positive, gentle parenting that I'm finding hard to subscribe to, partially because of the way that I was raised, but also like none of that shit has been proven out. It's like, 3 mom influencers that have been doing this for 3 or 4 years on social media. Their kids are not raised. Like they haven't been raised and living long enough to prove that gentle parenting is actually working. So I'll join that train in a decade or two after it's got some data
when their
behind
kids
it.
are like the next prime ministers and presidents, then we're like, okay, fair enough, that worked. And it's too late now for me to do anything about it anyway. But thanks.
Amen. For real.
Yeah. But look, I mean, the way I see it is, and look, my father was Irish. He was Northern Irish, quite authoritarian, I would say. He was a disciplinarian, not authoritarian. That was the wrong word. He wasn't a dictator, but he was, and at least until my parents broke up, and then I was being mainly raised by my mother, and she too was a disciplinarian. Because she had to become the disciplinarian, right? Because for the father was now absent, right? And I was always taught that the reason for that was because the world is a harsh place. And, I draw a lot from various people that I read from, psychologists and things like that. And because I used to be heavily into sociology, I studied it and so on. And, parents, not so many, this is a poor explanation of it, but essentially the way I've seen it described is a parent's job is to, ideally 2 parents, their job to recreate the environment of what the world is like in a micro scale at home to prepare them for the world. And if you don't put them into situations or encounters that mimic what the world is like in a safe environment, then they're not going to be able to handle it when it is in an unsafe environment in which you cannot control.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds right to me. Yeah.
It sounds right to me.
Goes.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But I mean, look, there's no harm in doing it, because what's the worst case scenario? I mean, obviously, unless you do it massively wrong, but I
guess the worst case, and my biggest fear is that my son is afraid of me and doesn't feel secure with me.
Right.
And I don't have a closeness that I would love, and that I've been lucky enough to develop with my father over time. So it's a gift. It's a gift, and it's given every day, really gradually. Yeah, that's something for us to keep in touch about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, and just lastly on that note about that fear, I mean, I can tell you that fear, at least for me, has never gone away. And so I completely sympathize with that. And there have been times, where I've had to raise my voice and discipline my child. And it's horrible, because you sit there and think, oh, is that it? Have I? And inevitably it doesn't do what your worst fear thinks it will.
Right.
I think if anything, it has the opposite effect. It shows, because you're demonstrating how much you care. I mean, the worst is sitting doing nothing. Yeah. Right. So yeah, I mean, it's up and down. It's a roller coaster, but it's the best adventure we can have, for sure.
Look at us, 2 mix trying to fucking turn the fathering tables. Yeah, I'm proud of us.
Yeah, we're doing it right. And also, I love the fact that you're a New Yorker and you've ticked all the New Yorker boxes. So like Italian, Irish. I mean, what more could you ask for? I mean, isn't every New Yorker an Irish or Italian immigrant? Isn't that just the deal?
Yes. Yeah, it does feel that way. It does feel that way.
Even though it was like a cousin distantly removed, like 5 times over, who visited Ireland once. It's like, I'm an Irish immigrant, right?
Yeah, well, that does happen. I mean, at least I have the name to prove it. But yeah,
that's true. Yeah. The funny thing about my name, and you'll enjoy this story. So my name McCallum. It's actually a Scottish name. It's not an Irish name.
I thought, but you don't have the MAC. You have 2 C's.
Right. Yes. So basically, my dad's original surname was actually Spears. He changed his surname because I quote, he felt it didn't sound Irish enough and he chose a Scottish name by accident. So that is probably the most
hilarious
Irish story that you will
hilarious.
find. Yeah, that's Irish through and through.
It feels right. It feels right.
It feels good. I enjoy telling that story. It doesn't paint him in a good light, but he's not around. So there you go.
That's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, we're approaching the end of our conversation. So I want to hand this over to you because I've already derailed us enough in this conversation talking about all kinds of crazy shit. But I'm interested to know, like, with your vast experience in the like startup ecosystem and then now this new venture and stuff like that, what are some of the things that you're kind of observing from your vantage point that you feel need to be talked about that just aren't being talked about enough of?
That's tough because I think people talk a lot about the customer interviewing and the staying in touch with your customers, but just people don't do it right. So what I would leave our listeners with is the challenge to do that research process right.
Define right. Define what you mean by right there.
It's complicated. It'll take maybe a whole another episode for us, but basically it's like write a script ahead of time. Write down the questions you want to ask. Ask those questions of every user. Don't vary the script between people or else you won't have a common set of data points to compare. Synthesize that data in a methodical way. I do affinity mapping and I plot the affinity mapping on a journey. Usually I start solving. Affinity mapping is taking kind of abstract concepts and putting them together under a common banner. So let's say we're building a B2B marketplace for plumbers. The plumbers are complaining a lot about their ability to get leads, but they say it in different ways. It's like, my referrals never call me back, or they'll say my marketing campaign doesn't work, or SEO, my website isn't really giving anything. They're saying all the same thing, but just in different ways. So I would affinity map that under customer acquisition or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And then I plot those affinity pools or clusters on a journey map. And I usually start by solving the problems that are earliest in the journey. Because if you can't solve those, people don't reach the problems that follow later in their journey. And then I go out and test that design intervention in a real way, either through a prototype or a competitor's website, or in a way that I'm getting real reactions from the customer. And one piece of advice I'll give when you're writing these scripts and posing questions to folks is to not ask hypotheticals. Often skew in a positive way because they don't want to hurt your feelings. So the best way to ask a question is by observing a previous experience. So let's say we're doing this marketplace for plumbers and I'm talking to the customers of plumbers. I can say, when was the last time you searched for a home service of some sort? It could be a cleaning service. It could be a repair service, air conditioning. It could be all sorts of things. But there's a similar behavioral pattern that I can abstract and apply to the plumbing service. So instead of saying, would you use this plumbing service, or would you use this marketplace for plumbers, which will often be said, yeah, it sounds pretty good, seems helpful. I'm asking about a historical event where they went through something that's very similar to the process that I'm interrogating. You'll get much more reliable results from your customers that way. But there's a whole science behind this, which is why I've spent and dedicated such a large portion of my career to it. So I can't come up with this slick soundbite.
No, but that was useful. I mean, would you? What about questions like if this platform existed, or if I gave you this platform, what were the reasons why you wouldn't use it, or what would be the problems that you would have with it? Can you ask questions like that to actually sort of almost counterintuitively get feedback on the other end?
I love a negatively skewed question, like, why wouldn't you adopt this? Why wouldn't you try this? If you're testing a product page, like a mock-up of your service, and they've gone through the service and they kind of understand it, I think that could be an appropriate question. But it does fall into the hypothetical category. I would then just kind of go back and encourage us to ask a question about why they didn't choose a service in the past. Like, why did you not choose that heating and cooling service? Why did you not choose that cleaning service? And they'll tell you it's because of the price, or it's because I didn't feel secure with having that person in my home, or the online reviews weren't convincing. And so they'll still all be applicable to my solution and surface areas for us to focus, but won't create a hypothetical situation.
Yeah, and you're really de-risking the nature of asking these with any potential sort of bias and so on. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Last quick question on this, and then I'll let you go. Where do you see the sort of sales cycle playing a role in this? Because I've been quite bullish for a while on
That's a great question.
companies creating a feedback loop from customer frontline workers, which are going to predominantly be in account management, in customer success, etc.,
Yes.
and ensuring that feeds all the way to the back, with
Yes.
product.
This is a big blind spot for, I think, a lot of product managers and executives. Yeah. Customer insights come from all vectors, not just interviews and surveys from the product department, right? They come from conversations and sales. They come from customer support if you have existing customers. And so using those vectors of information and having a consistent influx of them and centralizing them is really, really helpful. So I think that's good product hygiene to improve the product based on the customer support requests, based on the reasons why sales is not getting the customer. They're saying no. Oftentimes I think sales folks suffer from something that customer service doesn't. Customer service is asking questions, what's going on, why did that happen? We're troubleshooting. As a customer service rep, I usually know the product really well because I need to be able to answer questions. Salespeople know the product a little bit less, and they're oftentimes taking this very sales approach of like, trust me, this will solve your problem, et cetera, instead of listening and asking behavioral questions about like, oh, how does your organization make decisions about new software?
Yeah.
How do you currently solve this problem in a spreadsheet? Like, can you show that spreadsheet to me, or can you send it to me after the call so that I can get a better understanding of this? Instead, what they're doing is, let's follow up in 2 weeks. We'll do a demo, or they have these sales things that can work, but they fail to serve the organization by staying curious and asking questions and collecting information that they can feed back to the product team. So that would be the advice I'd give to sales folks.
That's great advice. And I would add as well, I suppose, that even those that I've observed that do the more consultative account management sort of approach to sales on that front line piece.
Yeah, they have more wins.
They have more wins, absolutely. But the problem still persists that there isn't an effective line of communication to actually disperse that information back to where it needs to go to. It just stays there where it is. And that's the issue. Like you've rightly pointed out too, customer success, customer support, there's so many touch points there that could feed into others, and I've observed that there's just everything is siloed, and that you don't end up with that effective flow of communication for everyone to benefit from it, whether it's sales learning from the churn issues or tech support
hiring,
issues, or exactly everything. Yeah, and I've thought about this for many, many years about how there needs to be done a lot more to create some sort of process that's a little bit more low touch, a little bit more seamless to just embed. I think it's also furtherly exacerbated by the fact that more organizations are going remote. And you would think that by default, that would mean that there would be technological solutions to actually solve this. But actually,
a document, a Google Doc or something. I agree. This responsibility, I think, falls on the most senior salesperson, because they're in the organization leadership conversations that are going across departments, and on product managers who are a little bit lower in the management hierarchy, but should be the connective tissue between these departments. So if you're in an organization, you're seeing this, those are the two people that I would reach out to and suggest some solutions around or brainstorm some ideas to create that connection.
Yeah. And I suppose it's just probably not even on their radar, right? Because again, from the top down, I mean, what's probably being mandated to be talked about in these sync meetings and so on is just, what are the performance metrics? Where are we? Let's move on to the next quarter. So it needs to come from the top down to say, I want you guys to focus on this as a really important priority every time you two sit down. So it needs to be made a very valuable part of the company structure.
Now it's on the agenda. Exactly. It's on the agenda for the weekly meeting or whatever. Yeah, I agree. I agree completely.
Well, there you go. We've just solved it. We just solved the whole issue. So you're welcome, world, for that. And Nick, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. Thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. I will let you go. Please, like I said, this is going to come out after Christmas and New Year, so this won't make any sense to people listening. But have a wonderful holiday period in Mexico, and good luck with finalizing the move and the new baby and everything like that. It's all very exciting, and of course the new company, the other baby. So
yes, two babies, a couple. Yeah, thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing more with the audience in the future.
Awesome, man. Right, thanks again. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Please like and subscribe, or if you are listening via podcasting service and want to show your support, consider rating or leaving a review. It really helps. See you next week.